everybody, welcome back. It's great to see you. Today we're going to be doing a really fun recipe. Super easy, anyone can do this recipe, and it will save you a ton of time going to the grocery store. And this one we're going to make homemade hamburger and hot dog buns. Now, you may think, okay, well it's just simple bread, but there are a few steps to this as far as proportions in the ingredients where you wouldn't just use a regular bread recipe to make some hamburger buns. This comes out phenomenal. I love them. I love to make them. They're just so light and fluffy, and you can make them as big or as little as you want. I tend to make them a little bit on the big side and make them more into a bulky roll so that I can use them for sandwiches as well. They make great bulky rolls for like club sandwiches or things like that for the week. So I just thought that this would be a great recipe to share with you guys. So let's get started. We're gonna get started first with the yeast. And what we're gonna do is I just have a separate bowl here. You don't have to, if you use the dry yeast, you don't have to do this ahead of time. I find though that it just really helps with making the dough light and fluffy to go ahead and start the yeast mixture first, rather than just dumping it all into the bowl and having everything incorporate together. I like to kind of start it first and like to start that bubbling process just so that when it reacts to the flour, then it already starts going. So we're gonna add 1 tablespoon of yeast to a separate bowl. And I'm just gonna dissolve this with about a half a cup of water. So not too much water, and it's just gonna be lukewarm water right out of my tap. And then that just kind of starts things rolling, okay? So that's pretty warm already. So we're gonna do 1/2 cup. Now the recipe calls for anywhere from 3/4 of a cup to 1 cup of lukewarm water for the entire recipe. So remember, if you do this step like I do, I've already started it with a 1/2 cup here. So I'm just gonna give this a quick stir, and then that's just gonna set off to the side while it just kind of starts that whole fermenting and bubbling process. With yeast, there are several recipes out there that you'll see that sometimes you'll have to do this first, and it'll always say to dissolve it in some lukewarm water. Or some of them, like this recipe, this original recipe, I've doctored it a little bit because I found that there's a couple of things that work better for me in this recipe than the original recipe was. I can't remember where I found this recipe. I think I might have found it online somewhere. I don't know. But I've kind of changed a few things just because some of it I found works better if you do a couple of different steps first, and the proportions as far as the water and things like that are a little bit different, and the sugar content is a little bit different than what it called for before. Now, after this is all incorporated here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take just a pinch of sugar, and I'm gonna throw this in here too, because sugar helps the bubbling process go. So 1 generous, sometimes 2, 1 for good measure, of sugar. So what I'm gonna do is just stir that in there, and then I'm gonna let that set aside. And it's nice and creamy. There we go, perfect. Okay, so that's just gonna offset it over here. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna start incorporating all of the other ingredients into the mixer and get it ready, so then we'll be able to put that in last. So first what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start off with my flour. Now this recipe calls for 3.5 cups of flour. All-purpose flour is fine, you don't need to sift it ahead of time. Like I said, when I transfer it into this, I've got my dough hook attachment on my mixer here. So there's the dough hook attachment there. If you want to do this by hand, you can. You can definitely do it by hand. It's totally up to you. But I like using a mixer just because it really helps. Well, it helps on my hands for one, but another reason is it really, really helps a lot when you go to make sure that you've got to make sure that this dough is really, really well mixed. And I'm not saying like whip it. I mean like no lumps in it, nice and smooth, nice and light, and things like that. So you definitely want to make sure that if you've got a dough mixer, that you use it. All right, so 3.5 cups of flour go in there. and that's just gonna stand right in my mixer here. Okay, so now the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put the sugar to it. Now, every recipe, every bread recipe has a little bit of sugar in it. If you want to substitute with like a sweetener or some honey or something like that, definitely you can. With artificial powdered sweeteners, be careful, because those are super, super sweet in consistency as far as their taste. So you won't want a whole lot in this bread mixture. I'm using regular granulated sugar for this recipe. And what I'm gonna do is add 1/4 cup of sugar. Now I've added a couple of pinches to this already. I'm not gonna count that as part of my 1/4 cup, okay? A couple pinches isn't gonna hurt anything. So the sugar, the reason why I put sugar in with the yeast mixture is just to help to that bubbling and that fermenting process. The sugar reacts with the water and the yeast. So just water and yeast will do the trick, but it won't react the same as if you just put a couple of pinches of sugar in there. So 1/4 cup of sugar goes into my regular stand mixer. So far we have 3.5 cups of flour and 1/4 cup of regular white granulated sugar. It's fine. You don't need any type of super fine sugar or anything like that. All right, so next what we're gonna do is we've got some room temperature butter. I just have my butter dish that I leave out on the counter. Room temperature butter, nice and soft, 2 tablespoons. All right, so this, you can kind of gauge it. I mean, I know this is about 2 tablespoons right there. So, and if it's a little bit more, a little bit less, that's completely fine. You're gonna need some more butter, melted butter later on, to be able to brush on top of these rolls, okay? So, but for the actual mix, you only need 2 tablespoons. All right, so you wanna put that in there. All right, so far, we've got the 3.5 cups of flour, we've got the 1/4 cup of sugar, and now 2 tablespoons of softened butter. Now, if your butter's in the refrigerator, go ahead and just microwave it for 10 seconds. If you've got it in the stick, just to let it soften up. Sometimes you may need to microwave it for an additional 5 seconds or something like that. Usually 10 seconds works, but it kind of depends on your microwave too. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna crack 1 egg into a bowl. I always like to do it into a bowl first, okay? And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add to it, we're gonna add some salt, all right? So 1 teaspoon, 1 1/4 teaspoon of salt goes in with the egg. And then I have my little wooden spoon over here. I'm just gonna kind of break it up and just give it a quick stir with the salt. All right, now that's gonna incorporate really nice. It helps dissolve the salt. Okay, so your salt isn't in one clump in the mixer. And this is kind of your wet ingredient, so that helps. You could dissolve this also in the water if you wanted to. I just do it with the egg, just because you gotta kind of beat the egg up anyway. All right, so that goes into your mixture. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add the water. Now you're gonna get your lukewarm water running again. And I've added 1/2 cup, remember, to the mixture there. So I'm gonna add another 1/2 cup. Now, depending on the humidity, I mean, it's summertime here, it's kind of humid, so it may only need 3/4 of a cup, but I've always found I've just used 1 cup and it's worked fine, okay? So I think the original recipe way back said something about 3/4 of a cup to 1 cup, depending, like 1 cup more in the winter months and 3/4 of a cup. It's an old recipe. I've always just used 1 cup, maybe because I've used the 1/2 cup in the yeast mixture, so it's always worked for me. So, I mean, I just go ahead and use 1 cup completely, all right? So I'm gonna do another 1/2 cup of lukewarm water going into the mixture because my other 1/2 is already in my yeast mixture. So 1/2 cup, this is a 1 cup measurement, so I'm gonna go about 1/2. I'm gonna dump that in there. And then we're just raise the stand mix up and we're gonna start that on the first speed. Okay, so we're gonna kind of wanna let that incorporate a little bit. And then, see my yeast mixture, it's bubbled up really nice. Now that's only taken just a few minutes. That sugar reacts so well with the yeast and the warm water that it makes it nice, light, and foamy, and the yeast has already started to work, okay? So when you put it in the mixture here, then it instantly starts to work, and then you're ready to go. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and pour this in ever so gently, just take my little spatula just to kind of get out the rest of it. Looks very good. All right, so now what we're gonna do is, let's just recap a little bit. I have a total combined of 1 cup of water in here, okay? Half a cup went in here, the other half went in here. Then I had 2 tablespoons of softened butter. We had a large egg that went in there, 3.5 cups of flour, 1/4 cup of sugar, and then we did the yeast, the tablespoon of yeast went in here with just a couple pinches of sugar, just to get it going. But then 1 1/4 teaspoon of salt, okay? So we're gonna mix this all together, and then what we're gonna do is it's just gonna keep going, and when I come back, you'll be able to see the finished product come out, and then we're gonna start the rising process, so we'll be right back.